White House science officials defend the validity of global warming research. This after critics say leaked emails indicate scientists manipulated climate data. At a congressional hearing, presidential science advisors say the emails did nothing to weaken scientific evidence on climate change. Wendell Goler has that story.
The carbon dioxide changes into carbonic acid.
NOAA Administrator Jane Lubchenco did a brief experiment she said showed how climate change is making the world's oceans more acidic. She was invited by the chairman of the Energy Independence and Global Warming Committee, Ed Markey, to talk about science. But Republicans wanted to talk about the leaked East Anglia emails, which one called the elephant in the room.
That elephant is the credibility of the entire scientific community, which has told us that the science behind man-made global warming is resolved.
Earlier, the university announced Phil Jones, the head of the Climate Research Unit, is temporarily stepping down. Jones defended his data, but a week before President Obama heads to the Copenhagen Climate Conference, global warming skeptics say the emails may undermine the chance to reach a follow-on to the Kyoto Accord by suggesting manipulated data and efforts to suppress dissent. Washington State Democratic Congressman Jay Inslee says the emails don't change reality.
If you could take those emails and chop them up and put them in a C-130 and sprinkle them over the Arctic and stop the Arctic from melting, it would be a good thing, but that won't happen.
With a graph, Dr. Lubchenco suggested the trend of global temperatures over the past century and a half is up, even though they've fallen the past few years. The president's science advisor says there is widespread evidence that civilization is responsible.
The unusual changes match what theory and models tell us would be expected to result from the very changes in the atmosphere that we know have been caused by human activities.
John Holdren says the East Anglia research is just a small part of the evidence, but for some lawmakers, it's enough to poison the well.
These emails show a pattern of suppression, manipulation, and secrecy that was inspired by ideology, condescension, and profit. They read more like scientific fascism than scientific process.
That was Wendell Goler reporting. Oklahoma Republican Senator James Inhofe says he'll push for Senate hearings on the latest email scandal. He also plans to go to Copenhagen to try and undermine the president by telling the delegates the Senate won't ratify a climate change treaty. Is now the best time for the U.S. to be focusing its efforts on climate change? And what do those who believe greenhouse gases are causing global warming have to say about the allegations that some scientists have been cooking the global warming data for years? Joining us now is the president of the Center for Clean Air Policy, Ned Helm. Ned, we thank you for being here today. Let's start, first of all, is this the right time to be going to Copenhagen? I mean, is the world gathering together to make significant changes in your estimation?
Absolutely. I mean, we've seen in the last 2 weeks movement by virtually every head of state of the key developing countries as well as the Annex I developed nations to announce significant targets. We're at a point where the president did that last week as well. Everybody has stepped up and signaled that they're ready to move. And I think that's the key to an agreement, that we all step forward.
The president can promise, but it's the Senate that has to pass a treaty, and we're getting some sense that perhaps not everybody's on board with that idea.
You know, I think the key for the Senate, you know, the history of this would date back 12 years to the Kyoto Protocol, was the concern that developing countries weren't taking action. They weren't carrying their part. And I think the president can come back to the Senate and say, look, we now have it. India, China, all the other major players in the developing world get it, they understand this is a problem, and they're ready to take significant action. And they have already done that.
Ned, I have to ask you about this growing controversy in this particular arena about the data and these emails, which seem to suggest that some of this data has been cooked in order to get the answers that you want to show that there is indeed global warming. And I guess my question is to you, what are those of us who are still trying to figure out where they come down on this to believe, given what we have read? It's pretty damning stuff.
I think the way to look at this, Brian, is that we've got thousands of scientists in independent centers around the world. When you see the president of China, the president of India stepping up, they have their own scientists who've looked at this and who said this is a real serious problem. And
they're looking at the data from these key areas. They're all looking at the same set of data.
For example, the U.S. data is its own. You know, and both Dr. Lubchenco and Dr. Holdren made clear yesterday, U.S. data is not part of what we're talking about from East Anglia. Other thing I think the important step back from this, Brian, corporate world, we're seeing BP, Shell, key coal companies, Florida Power and Light, all of them stepping up and saying, this is a real problem, we need to move on this problem, we're here. So I think, and actually, let's think back, you know, just a year and a half ago, the Bush administration came to the same conclusion. They're drawing on the same good U.S. science. Let's put aside the.
Let me ask you this question though. As I studied the data, and I must say that I believe in trying to do what you can to make it a cleaner world personally, but I'm not sure about global warming. I'm actually not sure. I'm really trying to figure it out. Honestly, studying the data, and the thing that I see is it's sort of flatlined. We're not getting warmer right now.
Well, I think you saw that if you see the data in today's paper. 9 of the warmest 10 years in history have been in this last decade. I mean, that's very significant. I think the data backs up, you have to look at this and say, how does this compare to what we've known in science on other pollutants? I worked this field 30 years. There's more consensus, more agreement on climate change than there was on the basis for a health standard for sulfur dioxide, which is killing people. And, that's a key. Obviously, there's always differences in opinion among scientists, but in this case, overwhelming consensus, and you got independent centers around the world doing this work. It's not like there's just one in England and that's the end of the story.
You will admit these emails were sort of a blow to the cause, though, right?
Well, I would say it's unfortunate the way it's been handled, but I think, in terms of substance, it doesn't change my view that we're past the science question. We're on to the how do we solve this problem.
Ned, I'm out of time. I got to run. I wish we could talk more. Thanks a lot. Stay right there. And we've been asking to hear from you. We want to know if this week's leaked climate emails have influenced your opinion about the validity of global warming. So far, 39% of you have responded. 39% of you have responded that the emails influenced your opinion, while 21% of you said no, and 40% remain, it's interesting, undecided. You can weigh in on the unscientific poll, we admit, by heading to our show page, foxnews.com/America's News Headquarters.